So you got a bit of a story to tell.
A little bit of one, yeah. It's been a busy last couple of years.
Yeah. What was it, 2022 this all kicked off? Or 21?
Well,
No?
I think the sediment started rising in 2021.
Yeah, when
And then,
COVID really broke out.
It was, yeah. Yeah, and the cross-border mandates were the one that kind of triggered a lot of the momentum, and instead of yelling at the steering wheel like I'd been doing for the last number of years,
Yeah.
I decided to put my actions in place, I guess. And
So you were hauling and they started mandating. So how did the convoy get started from there? How did you get not roped in, but how did you get into the convoy? Or did you start the convoy? Or?
I was with some of the other people that originated the idea, so it wasn't necessarily one person that started the idea. There was a group of people that have been working for the last couple of years around the provinces here that were protesting on the local legislative grounds in every province. And another social media personality reached out to me and just said, we need to do something. And the idea was then to slow roll our local parliament grounds in each individual province. And then when we started that conversation, we then moved to meeting more people that had ideas. Got involved with a few people that had the idea to go to Ottawa. So we just kind of, everyone joined forces, I guess, and then started. And that's how it was born. I did a TikTok video on January 7th, I believe it was. It was in Jamestown, North Dakota, hauling a big grain cart out of Shell Rock, Iowa.
Okay.
And the border mandates were there. We were pissed off. I worked right through the COVID.
I was going to ask you, did lockdowns even touch drivers or?
They didn't necessarily, but the highways were extremely quiet and hauling was all right. We didn't have the traffic to worry about there anymore, but the amenities that we were comfortable with were gone. The bathrooms, use of bathrooms, walking into Tim Hortons, McDonald's for a coffee in the morning or getting a bite to eat at the end of the day, that was non-existent. And so we more than once I had to stand in a drive-through lineup with cars in front of me and behind me, ordering my food through a speaker, and there was a lot of different things. And the more I think about it now, really it was a lot.
Well, we only felt it in the grocery store.
Yeah.
When you guys went off to protest, that's when we felt it. We don't even think of the day-to-day for a driver, especially because you do long hauls. Like you go down into the States and you're not there and back in a day.
No, I've been long haul for 32 years now.
Yeah. So
I've been all over North America, all over Canada, east to west.
But mostly equipment, hey? Or were you
freight? I did a stint for about 5 years when the kids were young. I thought I was going to come home and be close to the kids when they were born. So I did. I was a lease operator with a nice grain hauling operation in Southwest Saskatchewan here.
Yeah.
And then I started back on step decks. So I was either on step decks or grain was my main thing. And then in 2009, I bought my first RGN, my removable gooseneck double drop.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went from there. And that's
just a touch closer on the mic. Just pull it out towards you.
Okay.
You got a pretty good voice, but I just want to make sure.
Yep.
So then you've had Big Red for how long?
I bought Big Red November 26th, 2003. Jonathan was 7 months old.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
Yep.
And then you've been hauling with it ever since, and then slowly grew the company, more trucks.
I actually, I had about 11 trucks on the road years ago. We had an office in the hometown of Swift Current here. We had a mechanics, safety people, dispatchers, you name it. And
that was always CB?
Yep. CB, yeah. CB trucking. I got sick about 15, 16 years ago, something like that. I had a heart issue and wound up in a cardiac care unit a week before Christmas in Regina. And then after that, I kind of slowed things down a little bit and centralized things, built a shop at the farm and then put my office in the basement. And I just worked as a sole. Yeah. I just hauled myself. I kind of calmed things down and took a break. And it was over the last number of years that I had a couple buddies that needed a place to go, and so I reluctantly hired them on. And
well, there's always work to do in the trucking world: cattle, grain, equipment, produce, whatever. So you've been at it. I know you work your butt off, your ass off, because I've worked with you a bit through my job, and it's always holy hell, let's get going. So you're a blue collar guy through and through.
Yep,
hardworking, and then mandates hit, and clearly our government wasn't doing much to stand up for us.
No.
It seemed like the Liberal government was pushing it, and the Conservatives crumbled under pressure. I think, sad to say.
More importantly though, it was a failure on all parts of government. And I remember Scott Moe introducing the COVID vaccine passport in October of 2021, after he told everybody that he wasn't going to do that. And then it seemed like there was a meeting with Justin Trudeau. Justin flew in, Jason Kenney and Scott Moe had their talking to per se, and then COVID vaccine, that passport was introduced shortly thereafter, and that was. Here we go. We've been trucking here. We've been working our way through this stuff. We've been trying to stay safe. I always wore a mask. I always did my part. Yeah, we're isolated. And then they introduced this border crossing mandate, and it didn't make any sense to me because you'd cross the border into North Dakota, South Dakota. There was no mandates. It was a totally different way of life, business as usual. Minnesota was a little more locked down, but for the most part, it was a total night and day difference between crossing that border, and that's what kind of struck me.
I remember we had reps come up from the States to our Swift Current office, and we had masks on.
Yep.
He's like, "You guys, we never wore masks, not once." And we're sitting here like, I'd asked my boss if I'm going to have to get vaccinated. I was worried about my job.
Yep.
And they said, "We're just following the government. If the government makes it happen, then yeah." And I was like, "Okay, how do I move to the States?" Not that easy.
Yeah.
Apparently.
No.
So yeah, everybody was on lockdown and lined up like a drive-through to get vaccinated.
They did. Basically, it was literally they drove through. You think of the amount of mandates in the bullshit, pardon my language, that we went through during that. People would drive for an hour just to get a shot because the government told them to.
Don't want elderly to get sick.
Yeah,
People around you.
You don't want your neighbor 3 doors down to get sick because you weren't doing your job.
The guilt they put into you.
Yep.
And that was for me actually. My wife and I both. That's what threw off the alarm bells more than anything was a push. And we never did. We didn't go. We're like, no, this is all bad.
Well, good job.
And we stayed out of it. And thank God, because history is not really doing well for the vaccine pushers.
I ended up waiting till the last minute. The border crossing mandates were coming in 15th of January, 2022. And I knew, I spent the last 20 some years underwriting my own company, trying to keep those big carriers away from my customer base. And the federal government was basically handing those customers over because I couldn't cross the border anymore. So I reluctantly took the shot at the end of December, 2 weeks before the mandates. And
for your job.
For my job. And then the idea for Convoy was born, like I said, early part of January. And then stuff started to change.
So how many people, I guess, were in that core initial group for Convoy off the start? If you were on the ground floor there, like what did it look like in the very early days?
There was a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of people that I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know half the people involved. Tamara Leach contacted me about a week after I did the video or the social media post and asking me how she can help. And she was wanting to get involved. And that was probably the best phone call I ever took. Going forward from there, we just started meeting people all across the country and a lot of activists.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I know now that, we're a little different than what, I'm a truck driver. I've earned my living by trucking and a lot of others did too, but there's a different class there. There's a part of the society where it's the activist side of it versus the blue collar worker, those two sides, and they still clash to this day.
Yeah. A lot of people I think are just the people that didn't go to Ottawa and wanted to. A lot of people are just too scared, too passive to stand up for what they believe in, too much risk. And they won't do it.
Right.
So when people actually started coming together and do it, it was really nice for the country to see. I'm not one that ran away and protested. I supported it. I was all for it, but I didn't go protest still. I got mouths to feed. I can't run away. But you guys put all that on the line.
We did, and our bank accounts were frozen because of it. I've spent 47 years of my life never being in the back of a police car, never having handcuffs on. And it's been a new world since then, stuck in trial for the last 2 years.
Yeah. So do you remember the day when you guys decided we're going to head to Ottawa?
I think it was a Zoom call we were on. A bunch of us were on and still discussing the idea of this. And then somebody joined that Zoom call to try and help and join. And they had already had the mapping done and the plan done to go there. They just had to move their dates up.
Yeah.
They were planning that.
And there's always going to be trucking. Like that was, we got to do something that's going to make a difference, something that people are going to feel.
Yep. Let's
get trucks off the road and people are going to wake up a little bit to how essential this is. And if you start locking us down, because how much of your business is cross-border?
Oh, probably 60% of it at different times of the year. So
So you definitely feel it, food, freight, trade, especially in those days, maybe trade not so much right now, but I don't know if you're feeling that, but
no, it's like our industry in the ag sector, I think hasn't been as harshly affected with the tariffs as what, not yet, but it's coming, I think. But we diversify over the years. We do a lot of local stuff. We pull air seeders, we pull augers, we pull headers. We adapt to whatever the current climate is, and we're going into this. It's a kind of a recession time that we could be headed into right now.
I think so. I think this is just the early stages. I don't know if the latest captain at the helm there is up for the task. He's got a long track record. It's almost like 2.0.
Yes.
So we'll see, but it's going to be scary. I hope it doesn't hit the ag. I think, who I work for is a big enough company that they might dodge it just because they have some influence. But we'll see.
I already know there's sales being lost because of those tariffs. I know
I've lost a couple deals because guys let's just see how this year goes.
Yep.
We could buy, but we're bracing ourselves for impact here.
Well, we need rain. We're in a really bad spot right now where we're dry and
we'll look at Northern Sask.
Oh yeah,
we're in a state of emergency right now. Is it smoky out there? I don't even know.
Yeah, no, not today, but it was. You could smell it this morning, I think. So
yeah. So you guys said let's shut the trucking down, and by then you're confident, and you said you thought we had enough people that we could start snowballing, hitting the road. People are going to see us.
Well, never confident. I remember it was January 24th, 2022. I woke up in the morning about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I had the truck ready to go in the shop, and I thought, well, we'll just go into the co-op card lock in Swift Current, and that's where we were scheduled to meet, and we were going to go to Medicine Hat and pick up Tamara and join the West Convoy. And I remember coming into Swift Current that morning, and my son Jonathan was there, my little dog Zippy, and we were it was pretty nerve-wracking because we were like, is anybody going to listen? Is anybody wanting this?
How much work did you pass up knowing that you were taking off on this?
Well, I was pretty fortunate because I had a guy here that was working a couple independents, so we're still able to take care of the workload while I was gone. And honestly, January in the wintertime, especially as cold as it was, we were actually kind of calm anyway. But
so it was a good time of year. Not the best to sleep in your truck, but work-wise, not bad. So you hit the road.
I hit the road. We come into Swift Current. I come around the corner there to see the co-op parking lot basically glowing with orange lights, and had a good feeling. And then we went to Medicine Hat, and then seen the support of the people that were in Medicine Hat at the Red Cliff truck stop there.
It already started.
It was huge. Yeah, it was unbelievable to see the amount of people in the parking lot and the trucks coming in. And then we missed the West Convoy. They were pretty late. So we ended up, we had so many people waiting on the streets in Medicine Hat for us to come through that we chose to start heading out just to give them something to look at. So, and I think it was pretty, it hit home when we seen, police sitting at the intersections for traffic control and working with us. And then as we carried on east, it was pretty evident. There was people at every intersection on the highway, gravel roads. The Hutterite colonies was amazing. Everywhere there was a Hutterite colony, they were standing at the end of the road.
And they talk about, it just rings to me like when they're talking about Trump voters in 2016, the silent support, the people that don't speak up, but they sure came out. More people than supported you guys, not just in Ottawa. So how many people got to Ottawa? Did you ever get a head count on?
No, I heard rumors of upwards of 1 million people there the first weekend. I know that there was estimates about 400,000 after that.
That's when you're talking a nation of 40 million.
Yep.
Many of those are kids, babies, elderly.
There was,
That's a for your working population. I mean, people that actually can travel and do that. That's a big chunk of people.
Well, and it was everyone. You seen the Punjabi community had tea tents set up on street corners. We had clans mothers from the Northwest Territory that were with us there. We had a lot of different nationalities were represented. Every province was represented. It was the only time in history when. And Tamara captured this with a photo or talks about this. There was somebody from Quebec with a Quebec flag hugging somebody from with an Alberta flag. We've seen that divide that the government's been, I want to say behind for so many years kind of crumble when they scared the living shit out of them is what it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but the Quebecois rivalry, it's still alive. I've seen it. I've been to Montreal a bunch. You feel it there a little bit, but by and large, they're nice people. But, push come to shove, everybody got out and stood for a unified cause, and that was good to see.
Very much.
So was your big drive just for don't close the borders on us, or were you like, you can't tell us what you put in our body, or was it both or everything or more than that?
I've always, like I said, I always followed the mask mandates. I was never asked to put a mask on in any businesses. I just, if it was that much of a pandemic and people were that scared, I didn't want to be the guy, causing a scene in front of everybody. So I was kind of respected the rules, but when they were forcing that vaccine and then just to see the amount of divide that people, like they divided people in their own households.
Yeah.
And I think, and then as we got moving, and then you started to hear the stories from Canadians that were standing on the street corners telling you their stories, and you heard about the mental health, troubles, the alcohol addiction, the drug addiction, the suicide rates. It was, and I still to this day, I meet with a lot of people that have the same stories, and everybody's got a story to tell through those times. And
the news is happy to talk about you and your current court, but they will not talk about the depression, the businesses that closed. We kept the liquor stores open, but you couldn't go to the gym.
Yep.
Couldn't go to the playground for a bit there. Couldn't be out of your house. My grandma, who was alive at the time, was in a care home across the back alley from my mom's house. Didn't see her for a year and a half.
Yep.
But the unvaccinated priest could just walk in and out at will. And old folks' homes are, I think, abysmal in Canada as it is. Rates of depression are through the roof, and then they can't see their family.
Yep.
There's the downstream effects from what they did will never be realized. It'll never be talked about. And everybody just wants to make an example. Well, not everybody, but certain people in power want to make an example out of you. I think that's a lot of what this is.
Yep.
And shame on them, because a lot of people lost their livelihoods, filed bankruptcy, couldn't make ends meet. And now they're just trying to pick up the pieces still. They're still feeling it.
But I think there's a lot of animosity from those people towards those elected officials, and somebody needs to be held accountable for those actions, and somebody needs to acknowledge that hardship was done. And I think the more I speak to people yet to this day, the more I hear that said of it.
They did the investigation. I forget who conducted it, but there was like 80 or 90 recommendations to the government on what should have been done instead.
Yep.
And they did say, was it the Emergency Act, or what do they call that Trudeau enacted?
Yeah, the Emergencies Act, yeah.
Yeah, they did say it was unwarranted.
Yes, Justice Mosley.
Yeah, and no repercussions.
No, it's actually under appeal too right now, and it's facing some time. And the fact that the Liberals won this last election, they're going to fight that one tooth and nail.
Yeah, they will. And I haven't heard, is the by-election coming up then?
There's a bunch of by-elections across the country.
Yeah. Pierre's won.
Yeah,
someone stepped down so that he could run in his riding. Yeah. Which, I mean, we can get into what happened with Pierre's riding the last election. I mean, talk about gray area and
foul play. Yeah. Why is Elections Canada not looking at some of this? If the Conservatives did that to the Liberals, they'd be screaming bloody murder and protesting and burning buildings down. But the fact that they do it to us and it's okay.
It's funny that it is technically a legal technique they used.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with it, but man, is it ever a gray area?
It is.
And you can use it, manipulate it to, who knows, potentially turn an election. I'm not going to say whether it did or not on the last election, but man, it stinks to high hell. And we got to nail down our elections. I mean, the integrity of our elections is everything. If you lose that, then it's a slippery slope. And I think maybe we've been losing it for a little bit. We don't know it. Government subsidized journalism isn't really going to uncover the wrongdoing.
Well, especially when you get a double standard out there like you do right now. Government paid, media does exactly what the government wants them to do. When you've got somebody out there like a Rebel News, for instance, they're good, true, both side journalism, and they're crapped on and spit on by the stories that I was told from the people in the Rebel News media that were covering the election and were actually standing in the election to ask questions. CBC was basically spitting on them. They shouldn't have been there.
They didn't let them in the room, or did they cancel that whole?
They did let them in, but they were heckling them and they were, throwing things at them, and like the behavior of a toddler.
Yeah, and they're not. Everybody likes to say far right wing, blah 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 blah. Well, they're just trying to be unbiased.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, if it stinks, it stinks. Doesn't matter who you are.
Exactly.
And, you know, a lot of their news stories are just softball news stories, everyday stuff. It's not like it's hard hitting conspiracy theorist stuff. It's, and they have the name Rebel News, which is maybe asking for some trouble because it's like going against system, but go on their website. I mean, it's not crazy right wing stuff, but
no,
go into a hospital. What do you see on TV everywhere? CNN,
CBC, CTV.
And so you're not, and a lot of people unfortunately still get all their news from those sources. That's it.
I have some good friends, good farm boy neighbors, born and raised, cows, dirt farming, you name it, that are so heavily indoctrinated. They think Donald Trump is the devil, and they've thought that way for the last number of years because of what CBC, CTV tells them on rewind in their house, and it's sad.
I had a customer when I was in Kyle, the last location. It was early days. Are you going to get vaccinated or not? And I was out there having a few beers with him. We got along really great. And I said, he heard me say, yeah, I think we're gonna, but I said, no, I said, I don't know what's going to happen here. And then he found out later that I was not vaccinated. He called my boss screaming. He's never allowed on my farm ever again. So I never went back out to his farm. I said, well, we'll give that a year or two. I just could tell. And he did try calling me like a year and a half later. I did not answer the phone. I'm like, sorry, man. Like,
yeah, you showed your true colors.
Yeah, you did. And I don't know if you ever heard of the book, The Indoctrinated Mind or Indoctrinated Brain, but it goes through basically step by step on how to fearmonger program society. And it's just like, yeah, you could pretty much go back through all of our media things and see step by step how they got people. And then, you know, if you've seen a Snapchat or somebody at the time of people over at someone's house, people blow up your phone. Why are people over there? You can't have more than X amount of people in your house. We're like, holy, you guys, like just.
People don't like it when I use this analogy, but the 1930s in Germany.
Yes.
You know, people get really upset when, you know, how can you, it's not insinuating that today's time is like the Holocaust, but the indoctrination built through the German people in the early 30s was a lot like what is going on right now.
It's just technique.
It is.
I mean, it's the human mind and how it works and the psyche. And
what's that famous saying? If you don't know, if you don't know your world history, you're bound to repeat it.
Yeah.
It's coming.
And like, that's one thing I say to everybody, you know, Israel, but Benjamin Netanyahu, or I'm probably saying that Netanyahu, whatever, is an astute historian. Like, that's what he says is you have to be into your history or you'll never be able to understand like what you're doing and how it's going to affect the future. Exactly. And that's an interesting situation over there. But I mean, the Russians, they're masters at it, and they talked about it on tape about how we're going to poison the United States.
Yep.
That was what, I don't even know. 70s. And it's just cut and paste what's happened. And everybody just runs around like nothing's happening here. And
we're so close to, you know, a world conflict right now. I don't know. I was pouring money into Ukraine to fight that war and then using it to, you know, to blow up a Russian airbase. And then eventually Russia's going to get to the point where something sparks. And I don't want that. I've got a 22-year-old son that I work with daily that, you know, would be called to fight.
Well, if we had a draft, I mean, we've got, 30,000 people in our armed forces, including administration.
Yeah, it's not enough.
It's not enough. We've leaned on our neighbors to the south a lot. I think in that instance, you know, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, we need to have a relationship, and it needs to be good because those three countries alone really don't need anybody else. No. I mean, if we can bring more like tech manufacturing here that we're just happy to have done in China.
Yep. And
we all know what China's doing to every country. We got to just basically get off that teat and get back home. And we can build stuff in Mexico. Oh, we got prison inmates you can put on an assembly line for very low cost per hour.
Yep.
Get them building stuff, but I don't know. That's how I feel. So you get to Ottawa and you straight downtown.
Yeah, we were led down there by the police, actually. We started off Ontario-Manitoba border, OPP officer. His name was Marty. I don't know last names, but he picked us up at the border right at the scale there. And he basically led us somewhere around the Sault Ste. Marie area. And during the course of that time, there was OPP officers coming and going throughout the convoy. Like there was maybe 3 vehicles that were with us for safety purposes and the entire time. And we were always transparent with law enforcement. We always let everybody know what was going on, what our intentions were. And then city, OPS, Ottawa City Police, led us down right onto the street in Wellington and basically shut the door and said, we had no place to go. Like the truck was parked right in front of the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get out of there. So we just kind of locked it up and traveled off and started visiting. And
you're allowed to protest.
Well, we were, yes.
So did you have any legal advice leading up to this? Or you just, no, we're just going to go protest?
Yeah, I'm not a protester. I'm not an activist. I've never been involved with something like this in my entire life. So everything was new to me. And while, we had people on the ground in Ottawa who had, an office set up where we could see, social media, ambulance services, EMS, police, we were responsive and we called it the operations center. It was in the hotel and in one of the downtown hotels. Yep. And that was a busy place, but we were trying really hard to do things properly is what we were trying to do. And it was shortly after that, I realized that I said this to Tamara. I'm like, I don't want to be the person standing in front of a microphone at a news conference, but I'll be that guy that stands beside that person that's speaking. So she kind of took the role as somebody that would be the one that would speak. And she's a good speaker. So I was proud to stand beside her, but I found my role then after that to be on the ground, walking the streets, making sure that the people were safe. And law enforcement reached out to me right away and they wanted, help with moving intersections that were blocked or intersections that didn't have an emergency lane open or, anywhere where there was an old folks home or people living in where we had ambulance access to that building. And that was a priority. So I just found myself really busy for 3 weeks trying to work with law enforcement and move traffic and move people. And I think I just got into about 3 different physical altercations with truck drivers because, the police would say, we need this truck moved. And they would say, no, I'm parked here.
Go get Chris. Chris will talk to him and he'll move.
There was more than one occasion where I actually was able to convince people just do the right thing and get out of here. And now I look back at it now and I'm like, I'm 49 days in trial, 120 days gone from home, countless thousands of dollars spent in travel expenses and hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on legal expense. And I wish I would have slapped a few of them around because, I'm in trial right now because these guys, weren't working with law enforcement.
No. So you're downtown. So where are all the Nazis camped out?
Well, the Chateau Laurier was the place where the RCMP and police officials were held up. And that's where that flag originated. It was out of a side door at that hotel. You could still see the fold marks in the flag where I don't know where you buy a Nazi flag, but I want to say somebody in the city service or the police force in Ottawa owns a Nazi flag and no media outlets talking about that. Nobody did an investigation in to see where that came from.
Yeah.
They were so quick to dismiss it as just, that was the truckers, but it wasn't the truckers.
That was huge. I remember just hearsay driving around, hearing people talk about it at restaurants. There are a bunch of Nazis, the online chatter, the impact that had, they made sure it was in the news.
Absolutely. And it didn't stop there. We draped a Canadian flag over Terry Fox statue on Wellington and put a Mandate Freedom sign on his chest. And they said that we desecrated the Terry Fox statue. So what Canadian wouldn't hate these people for doing that? But yet, Pride season comes around and they dress them up in rainbow flags or Palestinians dress them up in a Palestinian flag. Yeah. And that's okay. Nobody complains about that. But, it's a double standard in this country right now. It's pretty sickening.
It appears to be a double standard. And I think the mindset of the media doesn't even come close to representing the mindset of the citizens. And that's often. When you hear of a bad actor, there's very few of them. And when the people that are supporting the good cause is often the vast majority, but the media is going to want, we'll use Trump as an easy example, but everybody supports Trump's a bigot. Yep. It's like, well, actually probably almost none of them are, to be honest. If you actually listen to what he's saying, no one knows that he's the first president prior to being elected to hold a pride flag on stage. Mm-hmm. And they call him a homophobe. Yep. It's just the mentality. It's like, you guys aren't using.
How many times was Donald Trump on the Oprah Winfrey show prior to becoming president?
Yeah. I heard at one point he employed more female CEOs than any other company in the United States. Yep. Yet he's a sexist, misogynist.
This is the government messaging that they use nowadays. And everything that the government or the media said about us has been debunked. They said that some young drunk lady was dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. They said that somebody, was urinating on the war monument. we've got pictures of city workers down there that had, payloaders and graders and everything blocking streets, urinating in between the wheels of their piece of equipment. But where's that mentioned? But they'll, we had 2 weeks of trial where I don't remember how many citizens came in, but citizens of Ottawa did basically a victim impact statement during the course of our trial. I had no interactions with anyone in a bad light in downtown Ottawa from the city. No, not one single, altercation or that. But these people came into the courtroom for a couple of weeks, and they told stories that like we were the most horrible people in the world. There was a child there with camouflage pants, and they were listening to Led Zeppelin. That was honestly somebody's testimony against us.
Wow. Anything and everything. So what happened at the border?
At Coots?
Yeah.
More of the same. It was more of the media and the government trying to find a way to vilify these people.
Because there was firearms in their vehicle or something.
Allegedly, there was a revolver in a backpack in a camper. God knows why somebody would do that. That was never been explained to me. But the big table of firearms that came there that the police were happy to present, that was from local farmyards within 10 miles of the protest site. They just raided different people's places. So I don't know about you, but if you hit any farmyard in rural Alberta, Saskatchewan, you're going to find probably more than that. But none of those guns were illegal in nature. But the media made them out to be that way. And you've got somebody like, Chris Carbard or, Tony Olnick, James. Why am I having troubles with the names right now?
Oh, I can't. I'm not well versed.
These four boys spent more time in Remand Center. And, some of the stories they can tell you is absolutely horrendous. They put them in, the crime ring down in, the Remand Center in Calgary where they were worried for their life. So
yeah, and they're going in there not looking the best, the way they've been painted.
No, but and what I've been told from them inside is they were actually, treated really well from other inmates because of the stand that they took. So
that's good. Yeah.
Tony and Chris now are in Drumheller facility for another year or so. They've already been denied bail, even though they've been dropped from a security risk down to the housing units.
Yeah. So you guys were there. You guys fired up the GoFundMe. I mean, keeping fuel in trucks, keeping people warm. Is that where you were staying the whole time? Was in your truck?
I wasn't. No, I had my wife actually flew out about 4 or 5 days after we got there. She didn't really realize how big things were going to be. So she jumped on a plane, took a leave from work and flew out. So we actually had a hotel room. My son, Zippy, my wife and I, so we couldn't, sleeping in the truck would have been impossible with that many people. So we had a room, but that's not like I slept there a lot. I got as little sleep as possible and just kept going. It was the longest days. I mean, you'd start at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and you would go till you could probably not walk any farther. I lost about 20 pounds just walking around downtown Ottawa for those 3 weeks. Yeah.
So most guys, if you could get a hotel, that's where the early guys went. They got rooms, the trucks were shut off. And what about the air horns all night?
For the first 3 days, it was annoying.
Yeah,
I'll be the first to admit that. I didn't blow a horn in downtown Ottawa, and it was a lot for the first 3 days. People are so excited to be living again, I think, and then the sound of those horns. Some said it was like a sound of peace and love and unity, and some thought it was annoying. I kind of thought it was annoying after a little while.
It's supposed to be both.
Yes,
we're trying to protest here, and it's not going to be pleasant, and it's peaceful.
Yes,
and. Was it peaceful from everything you've seen there, or was there some bad actors floating around? Or
the only signs of trouble I ever seen was Antifa would roll in the evenings, and you would watch them change their hoodies, put their dark color hoodies on and their masks on in back alleys, and there was some damage to trucks. They'd throw rocks at trucks, and any feces they could find, it smeared all over the door handles, and some of the residents were throwing eggs off apartment building doors and rocks, and
Was it Antifa that the Canadian government sent 50 million or something down to in the States, or was that BLM?
Probably BLM.
Yeah, one or the other that, one of the brick thrower groups.
Yeah.
That got funded by the Canadian government.
Isn't that something, hey?
Yeah.
I said that too. Justin Trudeau would take a knee for Black Lives Matter, but he wouldn't sit at a table with blue collar workers.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of problems could have been avoided if you came down and talked to you guys.
Just had a conversation, but we found out through the Public Emergency Order Commission that the government's messaging was clear right from day one. Before those trucks even started to roll, they were going to demonize us and use the media against us to smear us in a really, really bad light. And that's exactly what they did.
All over not mandating vaccinations.
Right.
They're going to push that hard against you. That is freedom to me. This is what they were against. Personal choice, personal autonomy. They are on the wrong side of it. You guys are on the right side of it. And they wouldn't even sit at the table with you guys. Meanwhile, they make a big show about sitting down with global leaders all over the world. And
we're having an actual member of the Nazi Party of the 1940s in the House of Commons and give him a standing ovation. Where's the conversation when it comes to that?
Yeah, I know. And before invoking the Emergencies Act, well, have you even talked to these people?
None.
Can we find some common ground here?
We had the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, which is an amazing organization based out of Calgary. They've got offices all the way across Canada and lawyers there. They fight for rights for people like that. So they flew about 5 decent lawyers out, and 2 ended up staying there. Mr. Keith Wilson and Eva Chipiak were the 2 that remained on the ground. The others went back home to work from home. But those was a pivotal point in the protest where we knew we had somebody there to try and direct us in the right place. Yeah. And to this day, Justice Center is still with us, helping us with different things.
Yeah. So were you guys getting, how much financial support were you guys riding on from GoFundMe?
None. The truth be told, we raised about $10 million for GoFundMe. And then we had to fight to get them to release anything. After a lot of fighting and even some legal wrangling, GoFundMe released $1 million into Tamara Litch's bank account, which she then put me on as a co-signer. So for full transparency, she had a savings account that was 0 balance, and she's very worried about that. Somebody would paint her in a bad light. Yeah. So she took me down to the TD and put me on this account so I could physically see it, and it was a matter of hours, and the bank was frozen.
So you guys never got really any financial support during or after?
All that money is still locked up to this day. So there was $1 million released from the GoFundMe, and then GoFundMe took that other, I think it was around $10 million. So they took that $9 million and they were going to give it to the charity of their choice. And it was through social media messaging that we said that you need to push GoFundMe. If they're going to do anything with this, hit the refund button, give it back to the people that donated it. And finally, that's what they did. But that $1 million was still sitting there in that bank account, and then frozen. So we started the Give and Go. Yeah. And that actually grew higher than the GoFundMe. Yeah. And it was US based. So the government had a lot less control over having it frozen. Jacob Wells is the owner of Give and Go, an amazing man. And he knew what was coming. So he was able to hit the refund button on the Give and Go before the government, had a chance to lock it all down. But what we didn't know at the time, we do now, was there was about $3.5 million sitting in the processing payment company called Stripe. And so that was discovered later. So that 3.5 was then frozen and transferred over to the courts, as well as the $1 million was sitting in there. There was a couple different organizations that had assets sitting there too that were frozen. And so to this day, 3.5 years later, there's $5.5 million sitting in an escrow account in the Ontario federal courts.
And it could potentially get released. What would happen with that money? What's the goal with it?
There's a $300 million lawsuit right now from citizens of Ottawa via Paul Champ, downtown lawyer in Ottawa.
Versus who?
Versus myself, Tamara Leach, and others that were involved. So that once we get past the criminal fight here, we're going to have to deal with that as well. So
that sounds like an Alex Jones 2.0.
Yeah, it's been quite the ordeal. And thankfully, my name was, last name is Barber. So every lawsuit and every quarter that comes out against us is usually, Zexy Lee versus Barber. So my lawyers have all said that your name will go down in the history books for court documents.
That's $300 million. And where's the $300 million in damages? Where's that number coming from?
Just in the air, I guess.
We think that you should have to pay $300. You're going to live 10 lifetimes and you're going to be very wealthy in every one of them, and you're just going to keep paying us. What happens? They're just trying to. That is such of making an example, making sure nobody else does this again.
Yes.
Nobody else stands up for what they believe in, and even if the cause you're standing up for is completely bogus and nobody supported it, it could be anything stupid, but you need to be able to stand up for it.
That's exactly what they've done. They've done a really good job at making people scared.
Yep.
And that is the sad reality of it. It started off at $3 million in the lawsuit, and it's grown since then. And what he's trying to do right now, downtown lawyer, Ottawa lawyer Paul Champ, who I think was working with the city officials and the councillors to find a plaintiff to be the person, to be the one to stand up here, which would be Zexi Lee, the lady that was employed by Service Canada in the CRA division. And she became that vocal person. We've got video of her yelling at protesters, throwing things, acting like a complete lunatic, screaming and swearing, and she ended up being that face. And she testified against us for a couple days in Ottawa in our trial there. And it was quite shocking to watch her walk into the courtroom with 3 armed personnel, bodyguards. Oh, really? 3 armed personal bodyguards. And I thought, what is the purpose behind this? Not one of us have ever shown an ounce of aggression.
Yeah.
And this is what it is now.
Well, you almost think that when things really got rolling in Ottawa, there's a really smart team that's going after you guys. They're not stupid.
No.
And they if you're a conspiracy theorist, you can say they started to build the case before the case even started.
Oh yeah.
They bring in Antifa to start inciting violence. They put the flag up there, the rumors. Let's get a public opinion against these guys.
Yes.
You could say that hypothetically may have happened and may be currently happening. And it could influence a jury. It could influence a lot of people. It could influence a judge. It's probably a technique as old as time.
It is.
And you guys could very well be victims of that. So when did you guys decide to start pulling out? And what was the reasoning there? And I guess before we get there, did you see Antifa inciting violence or trying to turn this into a violent, ugly protest?
I did a TikTok about this once. There was a bin dropped off in the downtown core that was full of brick parts.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, I know. And that was the thing then. But what the truckers did and another side of this protest too was it wasn't just truckers. The veteran community came out in force. And so, after rumors of this lady dancing on the war monument, the government put chain link fence around the war monument. And then the veterans showed up, and the veterans said, this is our spot and we'll guard it. So we actually took the fence down around Parliament. We stacked it neatly in the corner. I was there that day. It was a pretty emotional day. And then the veterans set up a tent in the corner of the war monument, and they looked out over it for that entire time. And so there was so many people out there, and as soon as there was an inkling of any issues happening, like bricks, a dumpster being unloaded full of bricks, what they're going to do there. And so then that group of people stood guard on that. They watched over everything, made sure nothing happened.
Yeah.
You have members of Parliament like Leslyn Lewis, who's an African-American lady, would walk through the protest site every day to Parliament Hill and said she never felt an ounce of aggression or racism or anything like that from these protesters. But yet you've got CBC, journalist Paul, there was a journalist in the downtown core that said it was actually farther for the CBC to walk to their car than it was to the protest site to see for themselves.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The bricks, we all know who probably put those there. It's crazy that there's still things going on, like with our government, our conservative government right now, saying, well, we know who was in cahoots with China during the last election cycle, but we're not going to say who. It's a whole bunch of stuff going on like that. I mean, George Soros, he's kind of known for funding things like that.
Yes.
I think that some of our leaders maybe have some strings hooked up to him with a lot of that. So, painting the picture that you guys are, white supremacists and racists and blah, blah, blah. And then have an Antifa come out and do all that stuff. And then in real life, nobody felt in danger. Like you say, that black lady who worked for government, no problems at all. And then they have people come in the courtroom and try to influence the court.
Absolutely.
How much of that is going on?
It's pretty evident that they're trying to lay that example down right now and make us the prime example of why people shouldn't stand up.
Yeah.
When we see, the Palestinian protests have all but crippled downtown in major cities for the last number of years. There was a case here about a month ago in Ottawa where about 11 Palestinian protesters were arrested, charged with obstruction and mischief, lobbing smoke grenades into hotel lobbies.
Wow.
And they were arrested. And as long as they wrote a letter of apology to the Crown's office or to the city, the Crown actually stayed all of their charges and they were all set free.
So we'll get into your whole legal battle, but can that be used as precedence in your case at all?
Doesn't seem like it can. Not right now. We're already through the trial. We've been found guilty of mischief, and both of us been found guilty of mischief. I was found guilty of disobeying a court order. I did a TikTok saying, there's a couple of things that have happened in this last while. Justice McLean on 2 different occasions, on February 7th or 8th and February 16th, 2 days after the Emergency Act was issued, wrote a proclamation or a decision stating that we were at liberty to remain in the downtown area to protest as per our charter rights, as long as the Horn injunction was followed. And Horn's meeting could be used in the case of an emergency. Mm-hmm. For pre-trip inspection or an emergency. And so when I heard stories of law enforcement coming down the street to kettle or arrest peaceful protesters who were practicing their charter rights, and I thought, if that's going to start happening, that would be considered an unlawful arrest, and that would constitute an emergency. You could be able to warn your fellow truck drivers. So I said, blow your horns if you see a vast majority of police moving down the street. And they charged me with disobeying a court order, and I was actually found guilty of that.
Okay, so when did you leave the protests, and what was your decision to leave? What got you out of there?
Court orders. I was arrested on February 17th.
So they came in, police officers that you knew?
No, different police officers, city officers. I was walking down one of the streets in the downtown core with my son and a couple other guys, and police officers pulled up behind us, and they grabbed the phone out of my pocket, and then they took that.
Yeah.
Because
up until then, you guys, by all accounts, had pretty good relationship with law enforcement.
Very good relationship, yeah. I worked with law enforcement every single day.
Yeah. And are any of them going to bat for you?
Not necessarily, no. The main liaison officer I dealt with for those 3 weeks testified against us. Oh. She wasn't necessarily harsh against me, but when they took my phone, they downloaded 4,200 pages of cell phone evidence off that phone, got a warrant and obtained all that information. So they took text messages, conversations with my children, my parents, my ex-wife, my lawyers actually, and they had full access to all that. So they actually used a lot of that evidence against me. None of which was really condemning. There was one text in particular where they said that Tamara had sent me a text and said, we need to meet at the hotel. They want to talk about gridlocking the city, and I don't want to make that call. Well, the city was already gridlocked at that time, and it wasn't because Tamara or I did anything. So they used that against me. It was pretty easy to cross-examine that, I guess. We worked our way through the trial, but
so a lot of it didn't stand up in your opinion, but some of it maybe they did get a stand up in the way they depicted it.
Yeah, and they've still been using that against us. We filed a motion against the criminal charges here a couple months ago for a stay of proceedings on judicial error. Yeah. So when we were down in Ottawa, we were taking orders from police. We were asking for advice. Yeah. Justice McLean's rulings on those 2 different occasions, we thought that we were getting the permission from a Supreme Court judge or Superior Court judge, to remain and peacefully protest. We wanted a conversation with our sitting government. We didn't get that. And for us to drive 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers across the country to just be ignored wasn't kind of something. And the other part of that too is when we were traveling across the country, we heard from so many different Canadians and stories they were telling, people talking on the side of the roads. And most people were saying, don't leave until you get some answers. We're tired of this and we want this to end. Yeah. And so when we were out there, we were really trying.
On the behalf of a lot of people. You didn't want to be there.
I'd rather been at home. It was a 3 weeks of very busy time for me. I wasn't protesting necessarily. I was on the ground working with police and trying to make sure people were safe.
What people forget is that you were sitting there protesting to stand up for the people that were even against what you believed in.
Exactly.
Their autonomy, their rights, defending them. And a lot of people lose sight of that right away. Yep. And that's important to remember that, agree or disagree, that those people are all standing up for you, really, everybody. Yeah. You pull out of there, you got arrested. So how long were you initially in jail for? Did you post bail or what happened there?
Yeah, so I was arrested February 17th. I was released on the 18th. I spent about 26 hours in jail. So that would have been the basically the drunk tank, I guess, in the Ottawa police. Pretty cold conditions. They gave you a slab of concrete to sleep on, a 5x8 cell with a stainless steel toilet that was mixed into a sink on the top, and you could get all the orange juice, apple juice you wanted to, but to ask for a bottle of water, they wouldn't give you a bottle of water. You drink it out of the tap if you wanted. Fingerprinted, and then my bail hearing was on the Friday, and I was the first arrested. So I managed to meet my bail criteria. I posted $120,000 bail bond.
And that again is out of your pocket.
Well, it was bail bond. So if I breach those conditions, yeah. I had 24 hours to exit the city of Ottawa. I had 72 hours to exit the province of Ontario, and my wife was a surety. So she posted $20,000. I posted $100,000, and then we left the city of Ottawa. And it was just I had the means home, you know, and then poor Tamara was arrested. She was arrested on the 17th too, a few hours after me. But she hit on a Saturday for a bail hearing and didn't have a way home and didn't have the bail bond, and it was just different circumstances. And then at that time I had conditions against her. They put me with, you know, do not contact conditions with a bunch of different people, one being Tamara Leach. So we kind of had no choice, but we felt pretty bad leaving Ottawa when leaving her behind. Her husband was there and she had lots of people around, but she remained in that remand center for 20 some days.
Yeah, I remember Tamara was locked up for a bit. So you get home, you lawyer up.
Yeah. Well, I got home and I kind of had to catch my breath. So I remember pulling into Swift Current here to 300-400 people in the PV Mart parking lot here to welcome us home, and then going home, and my life had been 600 miles an hour for a month straight. I woke up, I think at 4:00 in the morning. It was a winter day, and I sat in the living room and watched the TV that wasn't even turned on. I didn't know where to go. And then the lawyers, of course.
So people are still there protesting, or were you your arrest, did that kind of spur the pullout?
That was when the riot squads and everybody started coming in. That's when, a Mohawk lady by the name of Candace Shiro was ran over by a Toronto City Police horse. Mm-hmm. And they kettled and they beat people. They beat our veterans on the war, monument. They beat them viciously, and they arrested people. Do you remember years ago when the Saskatoon City Police were accused and some of the people were found guilty of dropping Indigenous people off outside in the winter?
Yeah.
They did the same thing in Ottawa to innocent, peaceful protesters. They dropped them off outside the city limits and said, if you turn right and go back to the city, you'll be rearrested. There you go. Frigid, cold temperatures.
Yeah. We're February probably at this time.
It was time of the year. Cold.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the people like the Bikers Church in Ottawa, they were able to, they knew what was going on. They went out and made sure these guys were all picked up and taken back to a nice warm church and fed.
So it's basically martial law in that city.
It was, yeah. They had a red zone. They still have a red zone to this day.
Wow.
Wellington Street was closed for over a year.
Closed to just all traffic?
All traffic, yeah. The concrete blocks up for over a year. So if they were so concerned about it being blocked for 3 weeks, why did they close it for over a year?
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I've heard stories of, Calgary Police Force has been doing a ton of training for martial law.
Really?
Yeah.
And Calgary was actually one of the most harsh police forces that were actually in Ottawa.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this, but they headhunted police officers from across the country that were willing to go there, and pump them up to the idea of beating the hell out of innocent protesters. So we had, some of the Ontario detachments. There was the SQ division from Quebec, which was probably some of the harsh ones. They used tear gas canisters and smoke grenades, rubber bullets, batons. These were people standing there waving Canadian flags. They didn't have a bat in their hands or anything. They had their charter rights. And one of the things I should mention too is the charter was written in April of 1982, and one of the signatures of that was Brian Peckford, the Honorable Brian Peckford. He was with us in Ottawa, standing with us in Ottawa, spoke on the stage. We met him in the conference rooms. We're good friends to this day. Him and his wife Carol. The truckers were trying to defend that charter, in February of 2022, 40 years after Brian wrote it.
So what does the charter specify? What is the Cole's notes of what he was standing up for?
Well, our freedom of speech,
yeah,
and freedom of protest. and we're at liberty to do, you know, our peacefulness in this country.
Yeah. Unless
bottom bodily autonomy.
Yeah. Unless you sign the Emergencies Act.
Exactly.
And then it goes back to another period in time not too long ago where they brought in certain people to enforce crazy laws. Like you say, it sounds like Germany at a certain time.
There is. Bringing
in people of a certain mindset to do the dirty work. Like it is, when you paint the picture like that, I didn't know that they recruited to be the clearing out crew.
They picked the worst of the worst. And when I look at the footage now, you know, there's a documentary out there that a good couple out of Fort St. John, BC put together, Eagle Vision Visual Production Studio. It's called Unacceptable. And if you have a chance to go watch it, Google it. It's online, unacceptabledoc.ca. Yeah. It's about a 2.5 hour documentary, and it takes you through the entire convoy, right from the Emergencies Act to the point where they were beating people. Yeah. Rebels News, you know, Alexa Lavoie was shot in the face with a tear gas canister. There's some pretty brutal stuff that happened. I didn't get to see any of that. I was in jail at that time. You know, I was picked up. I don't remember what time it was on the 17th, but.
Oh, so it was right after your arrest that they brought these people in?
Yeah, the order for arrest was given on the 18th. So.
Okay.
So we were already in custody on the 17th when the order for arrest was given. So.
And then they started pushing everybody out and beating everybody out, and it cleared out. And then you're at home decompressing. Were people reaching out to you? Was there support flowing in, or what did your life look like those early days at home after that?
It's been a wild roller coaster ever since. Yeah, there was a lot of people, media trying to reach out, and you know, I could have been a little bit more productive in the role in the Unacceptable documentary, but the lawyers told me to go home and kind of shut my mouth, and
which isn't bad advice.
No, and I did to a certain point, but I mean, there's also a truth that needs to be told too. So you had to weigh the pros and cons of, would we be where we are right now with people's awareness of what's going on if we wouldn't have been speaking out and telling our story? Mm-hmm. And so I felt that was important to do that, but still, you know, knowing that we have to remain somewhat calm towards some of the charges, right? So
yeah, big question that looms for me is, okay, everybody, have your opinion of the convoy, whatever it was, and the mandates and the vaccine and COVID, but what would you like to see if it happened again? Would you like to be forced to follow mandates and potentially lose your job again?
Well, knowing what we know now, like did the COVID vaccine, did it prevent transmission? Did it prevent death? You know, I'm friends with some people in the medical industry that say, you know, just as many people die right now from COVID as, you know, that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I've got a 22-year-old son at home, unvaccinated to this day, and the kid's, you know, he's sick with the flu once a year. But now anybody that I know that's been vaccinated is continuously sick. My father's a prime example. He got the second or the booster, and his gallbladder quit working at age 68. Mm-hmm.
You know. Cancer's on the rise. It did cross the blood-brain barrier. It did go into women's ovaries and reproductive.
Yes.
Facebook would silence female reproductive groups talking about, why is my period erratic? Yep. Silenced. And there's a large amount of them. Everything was silenced, and they pushed it hard. Like you said, will not prevent transmission. Well, no, it didn't.
No. I had an uncle that just vigorously hated me because I had the audacity to stand up. He would drive, you know, from Swift Current to Shaunavon for a booster. Yeah, because he didn't want to wait in line, and he, you know, the CBC was on nonstop in his house, and he passed with turbo cancer here a few months ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yep, 2 years later. 2
years later, and do your part, and the guilt tripping, and that, like I said, that for me was the biggest red flag. So
when was it going to stop though? That's something that I think about too. Marco Mendicino was speaking about doing interprovincial check stops prior to convoy.
Yep.
You know, it was the border crossing mandate. It was the interprovincial check stops. It was forced vaccinations. You know, a lot of people like to say, you know, the convoy didn't really accomplish anything. I think it did. We dropped, mandates started to fall in the provinces. The federal government was probably one of the most stubbornest governments you've ever seen in your life. But then I'm kind of stubborn too.
Well, you got to be. And when you look at China, didn't even use an mRNA vaccine.
Right.
They use a whole different means. But that's communism over there. They're
silencing the easy alternative, like ivermectin. I mean, my gosh, if people are so quick to judge ivermectin, but they don't know the history on that. When I was sick I was in Ottawa and I had COVID. I had the Omicron virus. I was sick as a dog. And I remember some good high profile doctor people giving me a vial of ivermectin, and I was better in no time flat.
Yep. Or, you know, went through our whole household. We had, in that time we had a newborn, a firstborn. It was 2 days of a cold. Yeah. And I thought this thing was going to kill me. It's like, all right, I'm not compromised. I'm not elderly. The kids in school, it's nothing for them unless you got another health issue that's going to aggravate
compromise immune. There's people out there that could be negatively affected by and those people need to take those extra precautions.
Did you know the COVID vaccine is gene therapy when you're taking it?
No.
Do not aspirate. And I mean, it just goes on, and no one's wanting to acknowledge that. Well, like our media is. There's people that acknowledge it, but they get shut up, or they got tinfoil hats on, and they love to say that, or conspiracy theorists. But it just goes on.
Are you still trying to draw this out? That's over. Move on with that. But oh my gosh, if they see a piece of history that they don't like, they're trying to remove that.
Yeah. You might be in a history book one day in school, and it might not be too favorable. We'll see if they can control that. But.
Yeah, I like to say that I never asked for this. I never knew it was going to turn. And anytime we're speaking publicly, both Tamara and myself, we're speaking for anybody that was involved in the convoy. That a lot of the truck drivers in the downtown core that I dealt with personally wanted somebody. There's been many times where they've said this. If they wanted somebody to be the voice for them. And they chose Tamara, myself, and then a few others to be that person that would speak publicly about things. And I take it as an honor that they want me to do that. So I continue to do that.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, like you might end up having to take a serious one on the chin for them. This might not end. Who knows what's going to happen with your case?
We're facing 2 years in federal prison right now. Yeah. And then the other option, or the other thing that's come up too, is they've introduced a forfeiture order for Big Red.
Yeah,
they want my truck, and we have to fight that in the end of July when we go back for the sentencing hearing. So.
And tell me what the logic is behind that. It's a semi truck.
It's showing just how vindictive they are and how they're willing to step on anybody and push it right to the limit of it had the audacity to call them on their bull.
Yeah, because if you crush the truck, well, I can probably go get another truck and earn a living. You're trying to do something symbolic, and that to me should not be in. That sounds like you're making a joke out of the legal system.
Yes.
You're not taking it seriously. Oh, we're just going to do this to set an example. It's like, well, the legal system isn't here to set example. It's to, apply justice when justice needs to be applied. And that's it. If you're innocent, we're not stretching it to make examples out of people, because you start doing that and that's just going to spread, and it's going to set precedents in the courts. And I think they'd like that for future reference.
Well, they've already done that with the mischief charge, right? We know that now. Why it took 3 years to get us through the court system is they had to build the case law against us by finding anybody else that they'd arrested earlier guilty of mischief. And, now the judge was basically forced to find us guilty of mischief because of, not because of our interactions with, how much I worked with law enforcement and tried to alleviate the problems in the downtown core, but that still didn't seem to matter. So,
yeah. So you get home, you decompress, the support rolls in. So what happens there? You're summoned to court, or you had a court date?
No, I kept trucking. So I took about a week off to catch my breath, and then back in the truck and started hauling equipment. And, I think I heard it on the news that I was being charged with a few more things. Originally, I was charged with mischief, and then they added 5 or 6 counts to that. So your heart kind of goes in your throat, and you're, oh crap, now I've got 7. And it's not just summary offenses, it's indictable offenses, and they're seeking 10 years in federal prison. So a little bit of anxiety the last while, and right off the bat. But, you just kind of trust in the lawyers and the system. And little did I know, 3 years later, we're sitting here at, I think it's 50 days in court now.
Yeah. 50 days in court, and you have to go to Ottawa every time for that?
Not every time. If there's just a hearing, I can usually do it via Zoom.
Yeah.
I've actually done it from the cab of the truck before, and you have to have the camera on, and you have to be able to speak with the judge if she asks you a question. So
have you taken the stand to defend yourself yet?
I did in my last hearing where we filed this stay of proceedings with judicial error. I had to actually do 2 days on the stand. So the Crown prosecutor got a shot at me. Whether this motion fails or proceeds, it was important to get my story across to the judge to let her know that I was in good faith, and I was working with police to try and alleviate those problems in the downtown core, to get people to quit with the bloody horns. And so that was a bonus on things. So, and I think we've built kind of a reputation with it's almost a funny courtroom. You've got these two Crown prosecutors who are trying to put you in jail, but you will talk to them in the foyers and you see the human side of them. And that's like,
yeah, lawyers are interesting. They can turn it on and they will talk to you for an hour and ask you about your life for one question at the end, where they're going to try to throw it all in your face and make and paint you to do something bad. It's very manipulating. They're super clever. They're really good at it. Very. It's actually impressive. It really is. It's a skill to be a good lawyer. But you were originally, so how many charges you had? 6 or 7? And one stuck. And it's the mischief one?
2 stuck. Actually 2.5, I guess 3. There was one. So out of 7 charges, we had 4 counselings. But we had the main charges were mischief, obstruction, intimidation, and disobeying a court order.
So disobeying the court order, you've been over that. And then how did they paint the other ones?
So everything was acquitted. Sorry, we had 4 acquittals out of that. 1 stay, counseling to mischief was actually stayed by the judge. So. In the end of the thing, it was 7 charges, guilty on 2, a stay on 1, and 4 acquittals. So,
yeah. So typically, your average Joe, what kind of slap on the wrist would he be facing with those charges? What has your lawyer said about that?
I've got quite a few people have talked about this. Buddy of mine was charged a $50 fine, and I don't know how many hours of community service for guilty of mischief, and he was done with that. So. It's normally known as a summary offense, not an indictable offense. They've gone as far as they can to try and push this to the limit to make sure that we were held. So have you had the same, how does the judge selection work? And have you had the same person following this case the whole time, or are you kind of all around? No, yeah, her name is Justice Perkins McVeigh. Yeah. She's, I don't know who she was appointed by. I believe it was the Harper. I want to say it was the Harper. She's a decent. She gives just as much slack to the defense as she does to the Crown. Yeah. If something needs to be called, she calls it. So, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with her someday after. I know that'll never happen, but yeah. Back in those days of social media, my vocabulary was fairly rough. I was a trucker, and my audience was truckers, and so I was a little more colorful back in that day. And when she had to do the verdict, she had to read quite a bit of it out, and she was, I was able to kind of basically apologize for that when I was on the stand for my stay application. It was nice, but so what do you now? You just got back from Ottawa again. Did. And what's going on? What's the latest? We're going to wait till July 21st for the first stage of the sentencing hearing. So Ottawa citizens need to do victim impact statements again. We've got a bunch of letters from people, character references for me, that they're all going to be put into account. I have to choose whether I want to give a statement to the court. We'll work our way through that. So there's a week set aside from July 21st to the 25th. We'll have to be back in Ottawa. And then I believe either she, at the end of her verdict, she actually said, it was on a Thursday, she found us guilty of these 2 charges. She said, let's get these guys back in on the Friday morning and let's get them sentenced and done. And the Crown prosecutor stood up and said, no, we need to do victim impact statements and drag this out a little bit longer. So then things were put off, and then we launched a stay application against the judicial error. It's a slow burn, hey? It is. It's been, I've logged 7 trips to Ottawa in the last 2 years. Yeah. 42,000 kilometers I've been back and forth. Countless times where we've been, 2 weeks in court at one time. So it's been about 120 days that I've been gone. My 22-year-old son, Jonathan, has had to step up to the plate and run the business while I've been gone. The good part about this was we got to take him out here last time. His truck's down for deer damage right now, so he was able to jump in the car, and we drove out. My father, my son, and his girlfriend Cooper. We went out to Ottawa, and so you're driving every time? Yeah, we fly every now and then, but I find driving so much more. I would rather spend 2.5 days on the road driving than spend a day in an airport with switches and that. I don't like flying. It is nice out there. I mean, it is what it is, but. The Bald Prairies is different. Yeah, it's kind of a race to get to through Manitoba, and then you get into the trees and the rock and the. So you're facing up to 2 years for mischief.
I I'd be shocked if that's stuck given the cases, but man, oh man, you just never know what goes on.
No.
The destroying of your truck is another matter, or they're trying to add that on?
No, that's going to come already at the end of July. So we're going to take a day to deal with that. So there'll be arguments back and forth on that, and the judge will ultimately have to decide whether I lose my livelihood or not.
So that rolled off of the guilty charge.
Yes.
And then they said, we also want to go after him. How did they even approach a court with a straight face asking for that? Like, how did that come about?
Oh, that was a tricky day watching that. So I was in Medicine Hat. I hooked up to a Vaterstad 84-foot drill with Big Red and had the hitch on the back of the truck, and I was towing that drill up to Valley View, Alberta. And I just left Rocky Mountain Equipment, and I was coming through the city of Medicine Hat, and I got a text message from the lawyer, and she's like, your court started. Here's the Zoom link, and you need to log in right now.
Yeah. I'm
in the middle of the city with a 28-foot wide drill, and I've got traffic control and pilot trucks. I can't just pull over. So I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm in a bad spot. I totally forgot about this. And I just put the phone on the dash and my headset on my head, and I hit enter. And the judge come on, and she said, it appears to me Mr. Barber's driving right now. And so my lawyer is quick to say, he's just here to monitor, Your Honor, and he's got a hands-free headset on in case you need to talk. And so I'm probably the only Canadian in history to be on a Zoom call with Ottawa, court while driving down the highway, 28 feet wide and 150 feet long. And being able to listen to the Crown actually say that we're introducing this motion for the forfeiture of, Big Red. They know the serial numbers, and they don't want to auction it off. They want to destroy it. There's no auctioning that truck off. And so that's my livelihood. I bought that truck, like I said, November 26th of 2003. I've changed my children's diapers in the back of that. I've raised my children. At any time I come home and the kids were sick, we'd throw them in the truck and they'd sleep for 2 days while we drove. And I put my little dog Buddy to sleep about 15 years ago in the passenger seat of that truck. He didn't like the vets at all, so the vet crawled up in the passenger seat and did it there.
Yeah. Well, it's put food on your table for a lot of years, that truck. Lord knows the truck, running a trucking company is not a cheap endeavor. I mean, you got blood, sweat, and tears into keeping all that going. And I mean, how many miles on that truck?
3.4 million kilometers.
Yeah, a few rebuilds then, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're on our third motor with it, I guess. We got 1.7 out of the first one, rebuilt that, and then we were up to 3.2, and she was shot again, but this time it was the motor was shot, so we had to do a swap. I had a parts truck in the backyard that had the right motor in it, and it had good oil pressure, and so we did just a motor swap without rebuilding it. And so far that's worked out really well. She's trucking anytime I'm at home and there's work to do. I'm out hauling equipment around the prairies here right now. It's all day, every day. I always say Subway is like my Achilles heel. I'll stop somewhere, get a sub, and then I'll come back in the cab to eat it. And I can never get through a sub without, somebody knocking on the door just wanting to shake my hand and say hi.
I was going to ask how the recognition is still with that truck, because I'll see it on the road. I'm like, oh yeah, there it goes. And I'm like, I don't even know if he's driving it anymore.
Oh
no. It's always you in the seat.
There's only one person that drives Big Red. Jonathan actually ran it a little while when his truck was down a few years ago, and he kind of come home one day and he said, I've had enough, Dad. I can't drive this thing. The attention you get going, and it's all positive. I should note that. The only negative attention I see is on social media with those people that are typing away from the comfort of their mother's basement.
Which, who knows if they're actual people.
Yeah, that's the other thing too.
Yeah. So have you started the signature collection? Are you doing any activism on your own to get just wide public votes just to support you? Or
I just go out. We were at a Rebel News town hall last week in Regina.
Yeah.
Met with about 450 people there. I actually was in town with Big Red, so I took Big Red up, and Tamara was there.
Yeah.
So there's always something to every time I'm out on the road, I'm speaking with people. I'm not much of an activist. I'm still not an activist.
No.
That name bugs me a little bit. I'm just a truck driver, and
you're on your back foot. You're just trying to make a living and keep going. And people don't want to say thank you, but it's kind of like you're welcome for your support. I mean, I hate to say it, but I went to battle for you. And so where's Tamara at right now? Is
she's in a Medicine Hat area.
Yeah.
She's a Saskatchewan girl. She's co-accused, so she's been with me the entire time through this trial.
Same charges.
Yeah. One less. I got the disobeying a court order, where she just got 6 indictable offenses. So they found her guilty on mischief, the one and only charge.
Are you allowed to talk to her now, or are you still on it? Okay, that's been lifted.
Actually, we had about 2 years there where we weren't allowed to talk to each other unless legal counsel was present. So we actually asked the Crown prosecutor if they'd be willing to drop those conditions with us traveling back and forth to Ottawa so much.
Yeah.
We asked if we could have those conditions removed, and their immediate response was no. So we had to actually bring a motion in front of the judge, and the judge had to rule whether Tamara and I could, speak or not. So she ruled in our favor, gave us permission to speak. We were a little bit nervous with the amount of travel back and forth across Canada. She drove all the time too. So what's to say that we don't walk into the same hotel some night or gas station or restaurant and we breach, and darn well with how vicious and vindictive the Crown's been, they throw us in jail in a heartbeat. So.
Oh, they'd paint that as conspiring and blah, 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 blah. It'd be such a dog and pony show. So
I get a lot of people that ask me, is it time to go back to Ottawa or protest? And I can honestly say that, I have the t-shirt from what we accomplished in 2022, but I don't think there'll be a going back to Ottawa anytime for a protest. I don't think that's where it belongs anymore. I think right now this movement for independence in the West is picking up steam.
It is after the last election, and honestly in the East too.
Yes.
I think the man to do any kind of unity didn't win.
No.
This Carney, he's from Edmonton. But he sure doesn't want to act like it.
No.
He came to Saskatoon, and I'll give him kudos for that, for the wildfires meet with the MPs. And how long has it been since we have somebody meet in Saskatoon? But
he's even lived in Canada for the last 10 years. He's been in the UK.
He was, I might be wrong, but Trudeau's financial advisor for a long time.
Yep.
Helping him make a lot of decisions. And I don't know about you, but my life financially hasn't got cheaper in the last 10 years.
No.
Since 2015, 14. He's a globalist.
He is, yeah.
It's nothing good for Canada. So we'll see what comes of it. But I don't think he's going to have your back.
Absolutely not. There's two people in this country that needed a conservative government more. It was Tamara and I for the outcome of her trial. But you know what? It is what it is. And we'll take it and day by day. And we'll just keep moving forward. Yep.
So July is the next one. Or are you not going back till the sentencing date?
We'll go back for the 21st. That'll be it. We've got 5 days there for sentencing hearing, and then whether she sentences us right after when we're still there, or we have to come back for yet another appearance. Who knows?
So if they sentence you, just say 2 years for you, is it going to be you have to present yourself in August 3rd to the prison, or are you just getting cuffed right there?
Cuffed right there, yeah.
Cuffed right there.
You find out the sentencing date when you're... Yeah. Pat King was fortunate. He had about 3 months of house arrest there is what he was sentenced to. So there's a lot of options there, I guess.
Appeal process begins.
Process, yeah.
And again, you mentioned you're funding this all yourself right now.
Well, no, the Justice Center, I've had the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has been behind us right from the start. They're helping us with a $300 million lawsuit.
Right.
Lawyer James Manson out of Toronto represents us on that. They pay for my first chair lawyer, Diane Magus, through donations and people that are willing to donate to the Justice Center. I was responsible for paying for my second chair lawyer, Marwa Yunus, who is now on maternity leave, so my bill got a lot cheaper there.
Yeah.
And I'm responsible for my travel expenses. So thankfully, the community of Swift Current here is so supportive. We've had a couple fundraisers in the last few years.
Yeah.
They've got me through that. The travel expenses is you think about it. The last trip we went out there, it was the bill between the hotel rooms and the fuel and travel and meals and everything was close to $5,000. So times that by 7, and that was only for a week. We've been out there for basically a month for, off and on.
Yeah. And I mean, you've worked, like you said, for 30 years, CB Trucking. I mean, you'd like to retire one day. This is just hammering away at your nest egg. If you win this, no one's going to say, sorry for your time. Here's a check.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's gone.
My nest egg is basically work till the day I die. So.
Yeah. Well, I know.
There was a time when I had money in my savings account, but then not anymore. So we just keep working and we put those profits into the company, and my son is a 50-50 shareholder in the company, and he runs it.
Yeah.
It was only proper to actually add him to the corporation, seeing as he was the one that had to step up and run it when his dad was gone for so long.
Yeah.
So
no, I got him when I texted, talk to my son. Okay, you're busy. So would you do it all over again?
Oh, I can't answer that until the sentencing is done. But what I can say is I have letters at home. I've got messages on social media. I've got in-person conversations where where people have told me how desperate of a moment they were in, how they were close to pulling the trigger or unaliving themselves. And because we stood up and those trucks started up, that we were able to pull those people out of that dark spot. So we saved lives.
I think the fact that they were found to be, enacting the Emergencies Act was not justified. It was found. So right. I think that might have scared them for next time.
Yeah. They're still going to fight it though.
Still got to fight it. You still got to get people to get up there and do it. They're desperate to make an example out of the two of you, I think.
Yep.
So that doesn't happen again. Just comply is what they'd like to do. But the fact that it was found, but no repercussions, just ticks me off. I mean,
no, my parents raised me to have a backbone.
Yeah.
I'm still, a really good, strong family unit at home right now. I'm very close with my parents. I had coffee with them this morning. They raised us to have a backbone and don't back down. And I've got an element of stubbornness inside me that can't be reckoned with either. So if they had to pick a couple people to pick on to make an example out of, I'm glad it's Tamara and myself, because we're still standing here. And in reality, I think it's actually made me a calmer person.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the best side of humanity in the last number of years. I've also seen some negative, but I choose to look at the positive.
It's probably a little sad to feel your government going after you like that. You're probably disappointed.
Yeah.
It's the
just to see the level, and then the other politicians who are here too, that haven't decided to have a backbone and stand with us because they're scared of the political. We're a hot potato is what we are. Even though there's so much public support out there, and I see it every day when I'm out trucking with Big Red. I mean, it's constant cameras out the windows and waving and honking and meeting people every single day. And it gives me the power to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it sucks, but at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to hit 2 years by any means, but if you have to do 2 years, I mean, it's not a 20-year stint. I mean, 2 years is going to be hell.
The left likes to tell me that there's this guy in prison. His name is Bubba, and he does really horrible things to you. So I'm hoping I get there and I find to meet Bubba, and Bubba's not a homosexual, and he's actually a nice guy. And
well, I think there's going to be a lot of people in prison that are going to support you.
There is,
I'm not talking like you're going to prison. I really don't think you do for mischief. I really think it's going to be hard for them. If I was a betting man, I'd say they're going to slap you with a fine. They're probably going to put you on house arrest.
Yeah.
But they have to act within precedents of the law and historical precedents. And
they're making us more famous than we need to be. And I think that's the other thing. They've been showing their true colors the last number of years. And it's not necessarily, it's not been in their favor. The public sentiment out here, especially when they introduce a forfeiture order against my truck to take my livelihood, it's added an element of anger. My parents are out there speaking to people all the time around the community, and there's a level of discontent and anger towards these people in these positions right now that I don't think they quite understand. Could you imagine the tow truck driver that has to come and haul Big Red across Canada to take it back out to Ontario? I wouldn't want to be that guy.
Well,
I pray for his safety, but
Well, 100%. And some of this, you wonder how law enforcement can do their job in some of these instances.
It is, yeah.
The stuff that they have to go out and do because they took the oath, and that's the job. And it might
but
be.
What's your line in the sand? What is that spot where you say, okay, this has gone too much?
And that's what I think we're starting to see. Like the person that told me that Calgary's prepping for martial law, he heard that from a female police officer that left because she didn't want to be on that side of training and where that's going. She's like, this actually scared the living hell out of me. I don't want any part of it.
And the thing you got to remember is there's far more of us than there is of them. And I've always been utmost respectful to law enforcement. Even to this day, I didn't see any of the bad stuff in Ottawa. I was in the jail cell, but everybody I dealt with was completely amazing. Like law enforcement all the way across. I'd walk up to law enforcement officers on the street corner, and my common question would be, any concerns here? Like, is everything going okay? And I remember one officer looked at me, and then he looked at the guys in the homemade hot tub that were on Wellington. He said, I think you guys are losing your point here. I agree, but I have nothing to do with that. So,
and you're somebody that actually has to follow law enforcement more than the average bear. Like, you're a trucking company. Yes. How many times have you been pulled over by a DOT?
Oh, nonstop.
You have to make sure that you're I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Everything you do, you are law enforcement. It's whereas people hop in their car and they speed every day.
Oh, signal light's working? No.
Yeah.
You know, and I go through, you know, and hauling oversize like we do all the time around the provinces and then through the U.S. I mean, I go through a scale every couple hours. It seems like, you know, there's one outside of Swift Current here. Everything's open all the time. And you make sure everything's working. You make sure your paperwork's up to date and you make sure you're compliant. And that's what we've always tried to do, even through this protest.
Yeah. You've been able to cross the border all this time.
Yes. Yep.
You are not a criminal. You're
not yet,
a bad
until
actor.
sentencing.
Until sentencing, you're potentially pending criminal, but.
So if that happens, I guess, you know, I've been trucking for 32 years now. If I have to retire from the U.S. side of trucking, you know, I've got guys that can run south. My son, I've been fortunate enough to spend the last couple of years with him since he's been old enough to cross the border to teach him some of the ropes and run with him. And he's, you know, I don't know many 22-year-old kids that can do what he does. If he's not fixing trucks, he's driving trucks, he's hauling big stuff. You know, like the wider the better. He doesn't seem to flinch.
Grew up with it.
He did.
So anything else on your mind about this? Anything you want to say to people, where they can help, what they can do for you, support? I
just appreciate the support. I said, that has been the most heartfelt thing I can possibly say, is the amount of support out here is greatly appreciated. There's a lady up in northern Saskatchewan that runs a website for me. She we bought her a heat press for doing hoodies. We had an artist in Regina. His name is Jeremy. Do up did a cartoon version of Big Red, and with that we put it on or Jerome, sorry, I don't know why I messed that one up. We did that on hoodies, we do that on stickers, everything like that. BigRedMerch.ca is the website for that, and every time you do that, you support.
I want a die cast.
Yeah, that's something that somebody built me a wood model of it, a huge wood model. I've got Big Red down in the office. Yeah, I think that'd be something cool. I don't know how that could happen.
Well, somebody out there, hopefully this gets listeners, and then someone's like, I can build a die cast.
Exactly. Get a hold of us, please.
Well, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. This is episode 2.
Nice.
So we'll get it out there. Best of luck on the 21st.
Thank you.
Next month.
I'll share it out on all my platforms.
All right,
Thanks,
we're done.
Appreciate it.